Hello and welcome to this short video on how to write an essay under exam conditions. This video has been prepared by mojitax.com. In preparing this video, we have considered the challenges students face when writing essay exams under exam conditions. To this effect, we are going to be showing you a few tips on how you can write very good essays under exam conditions. When writing the essay, it is important that you think about the following. Firstly, the timing. How long will it take you to write each question? Another point you should consider is your word count. How many words will be needed for each question? As good practice, I will suggest that depending on the type of question or the type of essays or the type of exam, 500 words is reasonable for an exam condition. Thirdly, your grammar. While you might have challenges keeping up with having proper words, it is better you use very simple and short sentences when writing an essay. This will eliminate most grammatical errors that could be associated with writing an essay. Thirdly, your referencing. We understand that when writing an essay, it will be difficult to use the conventional referencing styles. However, a simple bracket with your source of information will be sufficient under exam conditions. So, let's go to the substance of the essay. The first thing to do when writing the essay is to understand the topic. What is the essay asking you to do? Identify the aim of the essay. For example, what is the difference between tax competition and harmful tax competition? Now, this is a question which has been extracted from the June 2019 ADIT exams. Now, when writing this question, you need to look at, firstly, the similarities, and you also need to look at the pros and cons of tax competition and harmful tax competition. You should then weigh and decide on what you want to talk about it. In saying this, you might want to look at it from the perspective of the taxpayer and from the perspective of the competent tax authorities. You might also want to look at it from the economic value perspective to see how this has affected the value chain or the economic terrain. Now let's look at another question. Is there such thing as international tax? Now this is extracted from the June 2017 ADIT exams. Now, one thing you should always do is when faced with an exam question, you need to paraphrase the question. That is a way to understand and to tell yourself that you properly understand what this question is asking. Now, is there such thing as international tax? You might want to try it in another way. Does international tax really exist? If it does, what does it mean? Now, when you were able to change the question using your own words, you will be able to understand it better. It is also good practice that you underline the action words and the core elements of the question. Again, I can't emphasize how important it is for you to understand the question. So, in understanding the topic, there is only one simple rule. Read the question, understand what is being asked, and answer the question. You don't need to answer any other question, or you don't need to deviate. You need to focus, critically analyze the topic or the question, and answer the question. Once you have understood the question, the next point is to plan. You need to develop a structure that will guide you in writing your essay. So, how do you do this? It is good practice that you request at the beginning of an exam an extra sheet of paper which is different from your exam paper. Now, on this extra sheet of paper, you might want to write your introduction, the plan for the introduction, the plan for the body, and the plan for the conclusion. Now, in your introduction, you will want to show your reader that you understand the question and you have a plan. That's what your introduction will be doing. So, for instance, you might want to include at the beginning of the introduction a paraphrased part of the topic. Remember I said you need to learn how to write the topic in your own word. Now, you need to give a different version of what the question is asking. That way you show that you understand the question. Secondly, you need to introduce your statement. Now, for instance, if the exam is about the existence of international taxation, the question, does it exist? What you might want to do is have your statement. Are you accepting, or do you say it exists, or does it exist with limitations, or does it not exist? Now, this is your statement, and this will guide the rest of your essay. Now, you need to introduce it, but clearly stating that your essay will be able to discuss this in, firstly, talking about the entire scope of international taxation. Secondly, you also look at policy views. Now, this is your introduction, given showing that you understand the question. This is your introduction, also giving your essay statement, and this is your introduction, also giving an introduction into the plan. You have your introduction. Now, the bulk of the work is your body. It is good practice under exam conditions that you divide your body into two parts. Although this is not a standard, you might want to do it beyond the two parts, but again, you need to remember your timing, and you need to remember your word count. Now, the first part of the essay is what I call the argument of specifics. And the second part will be discussed later in this video. Now, let's look at what you will find in your conclusion. Now, when you are done with your arguments and your discussions, you return to your conclusion. Your conclusion will then look at everything that has been discussed all through the body and try to see if you have responded to the statement. Have you been able to convince the reader that you have a justification for your statement, which you introduced at the beginning of the essay? And does your body answer what has been asked in the essay question? So that will be a summary and a final justification of the entire essay. So let's look at the body. So let's look at the first part of the essay. This part covers the evidence, the already existing evidence. What is your view? You should create your statement at an early stage. Your view becomes your statement. Now, you use the existing evidence to persuade your readers. If something has happened, how did it happen? What is the implication? What you do with this is your evidence. You need to show the evidence. For instance, is it contained in the OECD? For instance, if you said international taxation or international tax exists, if that is your view, what gives you why do you say that this is the view you've taken? What evidence do you have to support it? Is it the OECD Model Tax Treaty, Tax Convention? Or are you speaking based on the interaction of domestic laws? What evidence do you have? You don't need to state everything about the evidence. You need to convince us that based on this evidence, you are able to justify that the statement is correct. Remember, the aim is to convince and not to restate what has been said. Justify every point. Every point of your essay needs to be linked back to the statement. There must be a reason for each point. You do not just write because you know this particular topic or you know this item and you don't know where to fit it in. There must be a reason for each point. Balance your arguments. You should demonstrate an awareness of the other views on the same topic. So, for instance, if your question said is all about the existence of international taxation, if your point is that it exists, you should be aware that there will be another argument that it doesn't exist or it exists with limitations. Now, when you demonstrate that you're aware of the other views, you should be aware of the evidence that the other party or the other person will use. So that's the whole idea of justify or demonstrating that you are aware of the other views on the same topic, you are aware of the other evidence on the same topic. And then you have to be constructive. Balance your arguments. So you need to take your view and the other view and be constructive about it. Ensure that your accepted view is stronger than the other view. So you need to use the same level of criticality on your view and you would use the same level of criticality on the other view. And then you try to balance. And you need to show that based on the evidence before you, your statement is correct and it is a better view as compared to the other view on the same topic. Now, when you are wrapping up, you need to ensure that in this part, your conclusive view is straight to the point. It shows that your statement is correct. Remember, we're talking about the first part, which is evidential. You need to show the evidence based on materials, based on case laws, based on government materials, intergovernment materials, based on the EU directives and laws, and based on maybe bilateral treaties. You need to prove that your view is the correct view as compared to the other view. The second part of this essay talks about originality. How do you then get your essay from, say, a 55, 65 to a 75, 80%? This is the first class answer, and this is where a lot of students miss out on the main part of the essay. Remember, we talked about that the first part is about the evidence. Now we're looking at the second part, which is more about looking at the future, looking at the present and looking at the future. In most situations, what you are doing is you're looking at the already existing evidence and you're trying to project into the future, considering what is happening today, considering already proposed materials, considering reports which have not been put into practice, and you are then trying to visualize and say, this is what is happening today, what about tomorrow? This is the part where you look at public policy, you look at the health factors, you look at social factors, you look at economic factors, you look at more recently digital age. You may want to look at what is happening around the world considering the coronavirus and all that. Now, this is the how versus the why. The why is you're talking about this is why it happened. How is it going to happen in the future? Now, when you're thinking outside the box or trying to create an originality to your essay, the first rule is to identify that there is a box, okay? And that's what you did in the first part of the essay. You identified the evidence, you looked at it, you critically analyzed the evidence which has already been provided. You showed us that you understand everything about the topic, the evidential part, and you've looked at it. So identify the box, embrace the box. You've looked at the two arguments and all that. You've shown that you are a master of the facts, the circumstances, the evidence behind you. You know all this, right? The next point is to push beyond the box. You need to look for alternatives, still aiming at giving a justification to your statement. So you might want to look at public policy. You might want to look at the political terrain. What is happening in the world today? For instance, when you're talking about international taxation, you might want to look at the digital system. What is happening today with Pillar 1 and Pillar 2? You might want to look at other topics around the same thing and looking at the justification that it might come to a point where there will be a global standard for accounting, and this will also lead to a global standard for taxes. This means you are pushing outside. You're saying that you are aware that this is the standard today, but tomorrow it might not be the same standard for these reasons. Because of what is happening today, the existing evidence or the existing reports today will push us to a stage where there will be an alternative, or there might be a different perspective. What I've added here is let public policy be your guide. Social, economic, and you might want to look at health, you might want to look at political, you might want to look at different aspects of it. So that's what I said, you build your own box. You create limits to what you are doing. So let us go through what you've learned today. Today we talked about the fact that when writing an essay under exam conditions, you should be able to create your timing for each question. You should be able to monitor your word count. Prepare your essay with simple and short sentences. And you need to have a plan. Your plan should include an introduction, the body, and the conclusion of the essay. Your introduction should be able to tell the reader that you understand the topic. It should also be able to introduce what we call the statements of your essay, and it should also be able to tell that you have a plan. The body should have about 2 parts, but that doesn't mean that you may not go beyond having 2 parts. You can have as many parts as you wish, but I think that when writing an exam, you might want to be careful about having too many parts to avoid being descriptive. So 2 parts: firstly, your evidential part of the essay, and secondly, your originality part of the essay. The evidential part of the essay should be able to create a discussion that is based on the already existing evidence to justify your statements. The second part should be based on already existing evidence to see into what will be in the future. And then your conclusion should bring all these discussions together and try to see if you have justified the statements based on what you talked about in the body. So I hope this helps you in preparing yourself for exams. If you will be taking the exams of Advanced Diploma in International Taxation of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, London, it will be good if you visit www.mojitax.com for proper guidance and preparatory training. Thank you.